Story 1. Zombie outbreak at a Florida nursing home. Maria Gonzalez was running through blood when she heard Mrs. Patterson whisper her dead husband's name. The 92-year-old woman had just bitten through orderly Kevin's throat. Kevin lay twitching on the linoleum floor of Sunset Manor, his blood spreading like spilled paint under the fluorescent lights. But Mrs. Patterson wasn't looking at her victim. She was staring directly at Maria with cloudy eyes that somehow still held intelligence. "Roberto," she whispered in a voice like grinding bone. "Roberto is waiting for you." Roberto had been Maria's husband. He died 3 years ago. Mrs. Patterson couldn't possibly know that name. This was how American horror began on a Tuesday morning in Miami. Not with screaming or sirens, but with an impossible whisper that made Maria's skin crawl with supernatural dread. It had started 40 minutes earlier during the breakfast shift. Maria had been working at Sunset Manor for 6 years, caring for Miami's elderly with the kind of patience that came from understanding. Her own grandmother had lived in a place like this. She knew the loneliness, the confusion, the way dignity slipped away one forgotten name at a time. But nothing had prepared her for this. Room 347 was where it began. Harold Kellerman, 87 years old, diagnosed with severe dementia. Harold hadn't spoken a coherent word in 2 years. He spent his days staring at game shows on television, drooling into a plastic bib. Until this morning, when he grabbed night nurse Janet Rodriguez and bit her face off. Maria had been coming out of the supply closet when she heard Janet's screams. High-pitched, desperate sounds that echoed through the halls like something from a creepypasta nightmare. By the time Maria reached room 347, Harold was kneeling over Janet's body, chewing. Actually chewing. The sound was wet and horrible, like a dog with a bone. Harold's dentures had fallen out, but his gums were doing the work just fine. Janet's face was gone from the nose down, revealing white bone and torn muscle that pulsed with each dying heartbeat. Maria screamed and Harold looked up. His eyes were completely white now, but somehow he saw her. Saw through her, into her. "Anna," he said in a voice that wasn't his own. "Anna, I've been looking for you." Anna was Maria's daughter. Anna had died in a car accident when she was 16. Only family knew that name. Certainly not Harold Kellerman, who had never met Maria before his admission 6 months ago. Harold stood up, Janet's blood dripping from his chin like chocolate sauce. He moved differently now, not like an old man with arthritis and a bad hip. He moved like something young and hungry wearing an old man's skin. Maria ran. Behind her, Harold's laughter echoed through the hall. But it wasn't one voice laughing. It was dozens of voices, all talking at once, all saying Anna's name over and over like a prayer or a curse. She triggered the emergency lockdown, sealing Sunset Manor's doors with steel barriers designed to keep confused patients from wandering into Miami traffic. The same barriers that were now keeping everyone inside with whatever Harold had become. That's when the others started changing. Mrs. Chen in room 351 was next. She had been a sweet woman who liked to show Maria pictures of her grandchildren in California. Now she was crouched in her doorway like a spider, watching Maria with eyes that had gone completely black. "David," Mrs. Chen whispered. "Where is David?" David was Maria's brother. He lived in Seattle. How could Mrs. Chen possibly know about David? The scary truth was spreading through Sunset Manor faster than Maria could process it. One by one, the residents were changing. Their eyes went white or black or sometimes just empty, like looking into deep water. They moved wrong, spoke wrong, knew things they couldn't, and they were all whispering names of people Maria loved. Her mother, Sophia, dead 5 years. Her uncle, Miguel, who had a heart attack last Christmas. Her childhood friend, Carmen, lost to cancer. All the ghosts from Maria's past, spoken by lips that had no right to know them. The lockdown alert brought police and paramedics within minutes, but the steel barriers held them out as effectively as they held the residents in. Through the reinforced windows, Maria could see Miami Metro cops arguing with facility supervisors about override codes and safety protocols. None of them understood what was really happening inside. The residents weren't just attacking staff anymore. They were hunting, moving with purpose through the halls, following some invisible trail that led them straight to anyone still human. Maria barricaded herself in the medication room, hands shaking as she tried to radio for help. But every frequency crackled with voices that shouldn't exist. Dead voices calling her name, begging her to open the door, promising that everything would be fine if she just let them in. Through the small window in the medication room door, she watched orderly Kevin stumble down the hall. His throat was torn open, but he was walking, moving with that same wrong gait as the residents. Blood ran down his scrubs like a red river, but he seemed to notice. Kevin had been 24 years old, a good kid working his way through nursing school. Now he was something else entirely. The CDC arrived 3 hours into the outbreak. Maria watched through security monitors as men in hazmat suits cordoned off the entire block, setting up a perimeter that looked more like a military operation than a medical response. Dr. Sarah Webb led the CDC team. She was young for such a high-level position, but her credentials were impressive. Epidemiology degree from Johns Hopkins. 10 years of field experience with infectious disease outbreaks. She handled Ebola scares and bird flu and the kind of biological nightmares that kept government officials awake at night. But nothing had prepared her for Sunset Manor. The first problem was the blood work. Samples from the infected residents showed no virus, no bacteria, no pathogen of any kind. Their blood was completely normal except for one detail that made Dr. Webb's hands shake as she read the lab results. The infected had no electrical brain activity. None. Their EEGs were flat lines. According to every medical instrument the CDC possessed, the infected residents were clinically dead. Brain dead, but they were walking around, talking, attacking with coordination that suggested higher cognitive function. Dead people don't coordinate attacks. Dead people don't whisper the names of strangers, relatives. Dead people don't hunt. But these did. Dr. Webb established communication with Maria through the building's intercom system. The medication room had become Maria's fortress, stocked with enough supplies to last several days if she rationed carefully. Miss Gonzalez, can you describe the onset of symptoms in the first affected resident? Maria, his voice crackled through static. Harold just changed. 1 minute he was staring at the TV. The next he was eating Janet's face. But that is not the worst part. What is the worst part? They know things, personal things. Harold knew my daughter. His name. My daughter died 3 years ago. There is no way he could know that. Dr. Webb exchanged glances with her team. This wasn't following any known infection pattern. Viruses didn't give the infected access to information they never possessed. Miss Gonzalez, I need you to observe the infected carefully. Are they exhibiting any other unusual behaviors? Through the medication room window, Maria watched Mrs. Patterson shuffle past. The old woman, his head turned toward the camera, and for just a moment, Maria could swear Mrs. Patterson was looking directly at her through the monitor. Mrs. Patterson's mouth moved silently. Maria couldn't hear the words, but she could read lips well enough to make out what the old woman was saying. Roberto says hello. Maria's dead husband's name. Again, they were not just knowing things. Maria whispered into the intercom. They were talking to someone. Someone who I sent to hear. The CDC established a wider perimeter as reports came in from other nursing homes across South Florida. Golden Years Retirement in Fort Lauderdale. Peaceful Palms in Homestead. Gentle Care in Key Biscayne. All reporting similar outbreaks within hours of each other. But it wasn't spreading like a typical infection. There was no patient zero, no clear transmission vector. The outbreaks seemed to manifest spontaneously, affecting only the elderly residents while leaving younger staff initially unharmed. Until those staff members were bitten or scratched. Then they joined the others. Walking, hunting, whispering names of the dead. Dr. Webb's team worked around the clock analyzing blood samples, brain scans, tissue biopsies. Everything came back normal except for that impossible detail about brain activity. The infected were corpses that refused to lie down and die. On the third day, breakthrough communication came from an unexpected source. Father Miguel Santos had been Sunset Manor as chaplain for 8 years. He was trapped in the facility's chapel when the outbreak began, and he'd been broadcasting on emergency frequencies since the lockdown started. This isn't a medical phenomenon, Father Santos told Dr. Webb through the radio. This is something else entirely. Something older. Father, I need you to stick to observable facts. What exactly are you seeing? The residents aren't acting randomly. They were being directed. I've been watching them through the chapel windows, and they move like soldiers following orders. But the orders aren't coming from anyone in this building. What do you mean? They re-listening to voices we can hear, and those voices know things about the living that the dead shouldn't know. Dr. Webb wanted to dismiss the priest's observations as religious hysteria, but the data supported his claims. Thermal imaging showed the infected moving in coordinated patterns despite having no apparent means of communication. Brain scans revealed no activity in areas responsible for speech or hearing, yet they clearly responded to external stimuli. It was as if something else was using their bodies as remote-controlled puppets. On the fourth night, Maria made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been studying the security footage, trying to identify patterns in the infected's behavior. It's when she noticed something wrong with the timestamps. The camera showed Harold Kellerman attacking Janet Rodriguez at 7:23 a.m. on Tuesday morning. But according to the nursing station logs, Harold had died in his sleep at 11:47 p.m. the previous night. Maria checked other timestamps. Mrs. Chen's attack was recorded 6 hours after her documented time of death. Mrs. Patterson had been declared deceased 2 days before she bit through Kevin's throat. The infected weren't sick. They were dead. Actually, literally dead, but something was animating their corpses, using them like vehicles to hunt the living. Maria shared this information with Dr. Webb, who initially refused to believe it. Death certificates were legal documents. Medical professionals didn't make mistakes about basic vital signs, but when Dr. Webb cross-referenced the nursing home's medical records with the security footage, the pattern became undeniable. Every single infected resident had died within the past week. Heart attacks, strokes, complications from pneumonia. Natural deaths that should have led to funeral arrangements and grief counseling for families. Instead, the dead had gotten up and started killing. This is impossible, Dr. Webb told her team during an emergency briefing. We're dealing with reanimated corpses that retain some form of consciousness and access to information they never possessed in life. Her colleagues stared at her like she'd lost her mind. These were scientists, trained to rely on empirical evidence and reproducible results. They dealt with pathogens and infection vectors, not ghost stories and supernatural horror. But the evidence was overwhelming. The dead were walking, and they were angry. Father Santos provided the next piece of the puzzle during a late-night radio transmission. His voice was weak from days without food, but his message was clear. I've been reading the Book of Admissions, he said, looking for connections between the infected residents. They don't share doctors or medications or family histories, but they do share something else. What? They all died alone. No family present. No friends. No one to say goodbye or hold their hands or tell them they were loved. They died surrounded by strangers in a building that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Dr. Webb felt a chill that had nothing to do with Miami's air conditioning. Father, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that loneliness doesn't end with death. And these people were very, very lonely. The theory sounded insane, but it fit the facts. Sunset Manor, like most nursing homes, was where families stored elderly relatives they couldn't care for or didn't want to visit. The residents died forgotten, unmourned, unloved. Maybe death wasn't the end of that suffering. Maybe it was just the beginning. On the fifth day, something new happened. The infected started talking in full sentences instead of just whispering names. They gathered in the facility's main dining room, standing in a circle like mourners at a funeral. But instead of mourning, they were planning. Through the security cameras, Maria watched them discuss strategy in voices that belonged to people who should have been silent forever. They talked about the building's layout, about weak points in the CDC's perimeter, about how to draw more living people inside. They were learning, adapting, getting smarter. We need to contain this, Dr. Webb told her superiors during a classified video conference. Whatever we're dealing with, it is evolving rapidly. The infected are showing increasing intelligence and coordination. Recommendations? Complete sterilization. Burn the facility to the ground and scatter the ashes. That's not possible. We have living survivors inside, and we can't authorize the destruction of private property without due process. Dr. Webb wanted to scream. Due process was a luxury they couldn't afford when dealing with the walking dead. But bureaucracy moved slowly, even in the face of supernatural crisis. While administrators debated legal protocols, the infected were making their own plans. They stopped attacking randomly and started targeting specific individuals. Not just anyone who wandered into their path, but people whose names they whispered. People connected to the living survivors still trapped in the building. It was as if they were following a list of people someone wanted dead. Maria realized the truth during her 7th day in the medication room. She He'd been studying personnel files, trying to identify patterns among the staff who'd been attacked. That's when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Every attacked staff member had family who died in the past year. Kevin had lost his mother to cancer 6 months ago. Janet's father had died in a fishing accident last spring. Orderly Mike Santos had buried his wife after a long battle with diabetes. The infected weren't attacking randomly. They were targeting grief, hunting people who were vulnerable to messages from beyond the grave. They were not trying to spread an infection, Maria told Dr. Webb over the radio. They re-recruiting, building an army of people who miss their dead loved ones. That is impossible, is it? Think about it. If your dead spouse whispered your name and asked you to join them, wouldn't you be tempted? If your deceased child reached out from beyond the grave, wouldn't you want to listen? Dr. Webb fell silent. She lost her own father 2 years ago, and she still dreamed about him sometimes. Still picked up the phone to call him before remembering he was gone. If he appeared to her now, speaking her name with love and longing, would she have the strength to resist? The infected know exactly which emotional buttons to push, Maria continued. They were not mindless zombies. They were psychological predators using grief as a weapon. The attack came at midnight on the 8th day, not from inside the building, but from outside. The CDC perimeter was breached by people who looked completely normal. Concerned family members demanding to visit their elderly relatives. Protesters claiming the government was violating civil rights. Reporters seeking interviews about the mysterious quarantine. Except none of them were actually alive. Dr. Webb recognized the pattern too late. The new arrivals all had the same telltale signs as the infected residents. Pale skin, empty eyes, that wrong way of moving that suggested puppets rather than people. The dead weren't confined to Sunset Manor anymore. They were everywhere, walking through Miami streets, knocking on doors, visiting their own families. Spreading the message that death wasn't the end, just a transition to something better. Something hungry. The city's emergency broadcast system crackled to life at 3 a.m., but instead of official warnings, it carried whispered voices promising reunion with deceased loved ones. Radio stations played ghostly messages from beyond the grave. Television screens filled with static that somehow formed words, personal messages from the dead to the living. Miami was becoming a city of ghosts, and the ghosts wanted company. Maria watched through security monitors as the CDC team was overrun by people who should have been in morgues and funeral homes. Dr. Webb tried to run, but her own father was waiting in the parking lot, arms outstretched in a welcoming embrace. "Sarah," he said in a voice like wind through cemetery trees. "I missed you so much. Come home with me?" Dr. Webb hesitated, just for a moment, but that moment was enough. Her father, his arms closed around her, and she stopped struggling. Stopped running. Her eyes went white, and when she smiled, it wasn't your smile anymore. It was something else wearing her face. The last transmission from Sunset Manor came from Father Santos in the chapel. His voice was weak but determined as he spoke into the emergency radio. "This is Father Miguel Santos broadcasting from ground zero of what the media is calling a zombie outbreak. But it is not zombies. It is something worse. It is loneliness given form. Grief weaponized. The dead returning not for brains or flesh, but for connection." Static crackled through the transmission. The infected dawn. They want to destroy the living. They want to recruit them. They rebuilding a community of the dead, and they reusing love as bait. They whisper the names of people they lost, promise reunions that seem too good to be true. His voice grew fainter, but they are too good to be true. Death isn't a doorway to a better place. It's just death, and the dead need to stay dead. The transmission cut to static. 3 hours later, Father Santos emerged from the chapel. His eyes were white as fresh snow, and he was smiling a smile that belonged to someone else. By dawn, the outbreak had spread beyond South Florida. Reports came in from nursing homes across the country, California, Texas, New York, all following the same pattern. The elderly dying and returning, recruiting staff and visitors, spreading through communities like a plague of false hope. The CDC declared a national emergency, but it was too late. The infected didn't respect quarantine barriers or military checkpoints. They looked human, acted human, passed every medical test except the ones that mattered. They had no brain activity, no pulse, no body heat, but they walked and talked and whispered the names of the dead with voices that sounded like coming home. Maria remained barricaded in the medication room for 3 more days, watching Miami transform through security cameras. The city looked normal during daylight hours. People went to work, children played in parks. Traffic moved through intersections with typical Florida impatience. But at night, the dead walked freely. They visited old friends and distant relatives. They knocked on doors and made phone calls and sent text messages from beyond the grave. They promised that death wasn't too painful, wasn't too permanent, wasn't the end of anything important. They lied, but they lied so beautifully that people believed them. Maria's own phone rang on the 11th night. The caller ID showed Roberto's name, even though Roberto had been dead for 3 years and his phone had been disconnected long ago. She almost answered. Her finger hovered over the green button, trembling with 3 years of accumulated grief and loneliness. Roberto had been her soulmate, her partner, and everything that mattered. Life without him felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit, living in a house that echoed with his absence. If he was calling, if he was reaching out from whatever came after death, wouldn't it be cruel to ignore him? The phone rang again. Roberto's picture appeared on the screen, smiling the same smile she'd fallen in love with 25 years ago. The same smile she kissed goodbye the morning he left for work and never came home. Maria's thumb touched the answer button. "Hello," she whispered. "Am I more?" Roberto's voice said through the speaker. "I've been waiting for you." It sounded exactly like him. The same accent, the same pet name he used since their first date. Even the same slight raspiness from years of smoking cigarettes he quit but never forgotten. "Roberto, is it really you?" "Of course it is me. I've been trying to reach you for so long, but the living world is so noisy, so hard to break through. But now, finally, you can hear me." Tears ran down Maria's face. 3 years of grief and loneliness and missing him so badly it felt like drowning. 3 years of waking up alone and going to bed alone and pretending she was okay when she wasn't okay at all. "I miss you," she sobbed into the phone. "I miss you so much it hurts." "I know. Am I more?" "I miss you too. But we don't have to be apart anymore. I can show you the way to where I am. It's beautiful here. Peaceful. No more pain. No more loneliness. Just us. Together forever." It sounded perfect. It sounded like everything she dreamed about during those long, empty nights when sleep wouldn't come and the house felt too big for one person. But something was wrong. Roberto's voice was perfect, but the words weren't quite right. He never called her "Am I more" in English. Always in Spanish. "Am I corazón?" My heart. That had been his name for her. Small details, but Roberto had been careful about details. Precise. It was one of the things she loved about him. "You're not Roberto," she said quietly. Silence on the other end of the line. "Of course I am Roberto. I am your husband. I love you. I want to be with you." Roberto never spoke English and Spanish in the same sentence. He said it confused his brain, made him sound stupid. "You, not him." The voice on the phone changed. Still Roberto's tone and accent, but the warmth drained out of it. "Does it matter? I can be Roberto for you. I can be anyone you want me to be. I know how lonely you are, Maria. I know how much you hurt. I can make the pain stop. By making me like you? By making me dead? By making you free, death isn't to what you think it is. It's just letting go of things that don't matter anyway. Your job, your bills, your aging body, your grief. All of it disappears, and what is left is pure connection. Pure love." Maria hung up. The phone rang again immediately. This time the caller ID showed Anna's name. Her daughter, dead at 16, calling from a phone that had been buried with her. Maria turned off the phone and threw it across the room. But the voices didn't stop. They came through the building's intercom system, through the radio, through the security monitors that somehow picked up ghostly transmissions from beyond the grave. Roberto and Anna and her mother Sophia and Uncle Miguel and every person she ever loved and lost, all calling her name, all promising that death was just another doorway and she didn't have to walk through it alone. The scary thing was how tempting it sounded. Maria had been alone for so long. 3 years of eating dinner by herself, watching movies no one else wanted to see, sleeping in a bed that felt too big and too empty. 3 years of pretending she was fine when people asked how she was doing. Maybe being dead wouldn't be so bad if it meant seeing Roberto again. Maybe the voices were telling the truth about death being just a transition. Maybe she really could let go of loneliness and grief and find peace with the people she lost. But deep down, Maria knew better. Death was final, period. The voices promising otherwise were predators wearing familiar faces, using love as bait to trap the living in whatever nightmare they created. Roberta was gone. Anna was gone. All the people she loved and lost were gone, and nothing could bring them back. The things wearing their voices were something else entirely. On the 14th day, the military arrived in Miami with orders to contain the outbreak by any means necessary. They set up roadblocks and checkpoints, screening citizens for signs of infection. But how do you screen for death when the dead look exactly like the living? The infected passed every test. Temperature normal, pulse normal, blood pressure normal. Brain scans showed activity that looked perfectly human, even though Maria knew the truth. Whatever was controlling the bodies had learned to fake the signs of life. The military cordoned off Sunset Manor and other ground zero locations, but the infected had already scattered throughout the population. They went to work and school and grocery stores, spreading their message of false hope to anyone grieving a recent loss. Join us, they whispered. Stop hurting, stop being alone, let go of life and find peace in death. And people listened, because everyone had lost someone. Everyone knew grief. Everyone understood the temptation to believe that death wasn't really the end. Maria watched Miami fall through her security monitors. Not in violent chaos, but in quiet surrender. People simply stopped struggling against loss and loneliness. They accepted invitations from dead loved ones and walked calmly into whatever waited beyond life. The city grew quieter each day as more residents joined the ranks of the infected. Traffic thinned, businesses closed, schools emptied, not because of panic or violence, but because the living were choosing to become dead. It was seductive in its simplicity. No more bills, no more heartbreak, no more aging or sickness or loss. Just eternal reunion with everyone you ever loved. All you had to do was stop breathing. On the 20th day, Maria made her decision. She couldn't stay in the medication room forever. Her supplies were running low, and the infected had stopped trying to break down the door. They knew she would come out eventually. Everyone did. In the end, grief was patient. Loneliness was persistent. Love was the strongest trap of all. Maria unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway where Mrs. Patterson was waiting. The old woman smiled with teeth that were too white, eyes that were too knowing. Roberto is here, Mrs. Patterson said in a voice like autumn leaves. He has been waiting so patiently for you. And there he was, Roberto Gonzalez, looking exactly as he had the morning he kissed Maria goodbye 3 years ago. Same khaki work clothes, same coffee stain on his shirt from breakfast, same smile that made her heart skip beats. "Am I corazon?" he said in perfect Spanish. "I told you I'd never leave you." Maria's resolve crumbled like sand castles at high tide. 3 years of missing him, of sleeping alone, of pretending she was strong enough to live without her other half. She wasn't strong enough. Nobody was. "Is it really you?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" Roberto asked, holding out his hand. "I am here now. We can be together. No more pain, no more loneliness. Just us." Maria reached for his hand. Their fingers touched, and she felt cold that went deeper than bone. Cold that touched the part of her that was still alive and started pulling it away from her body like smoke. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. The CDC files on the Miami incident were classified at the highest levels and sealed away from public access. Official reports blamed contaminated food supplies and mass hallucinations caused by toxic mold. The affected nursing homes were demolished and the land was declared unsuitable for development. But sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet and grief feels too heavy to carry alone, people report hearing voices calling their names. Familiar voices promising that death isn't to the end. Just the beginning of something better. Something that doesn't hurt. Something that whispers your name with the voice of everyone you ever loved and lost. The voices are very patient. And everyone, eventually, misses someone enough to listen. Story 2. Motel room that doesn't exist. Jake, his fingernails scraped against concrete as he clawed at the wall behind his bed. The scratching sound from inside the walls had stopped 20 minutes ago. Now the silence was worse. Much worse. He pressed his ear against the faded wallpaper, listening for any sign of movement. The Desert Palms Motel felt dead around him. No traffic outside, no voices from other rooms. Just the hum of a broken air conditioner and his own ragged breathing. The journal lay open on the nightstand, filled with his increasingly frantic handwriting. The last entry made his stomach twist. They under the bed. They've always been under the bed. Room 13 doesn't exist, but I am here. I am here and I can leave. This nightmare started 3 days ago when Jake pulled off Interstate 95 outside Las Vegas. His ancient Honda had been making concerning noises for the last 100 miles, and the temperature gauge was creeping toward the red zone. The Desert Palms Motel appeared like a mirage through the heat shimmer. Cheap rates, vacancy sign flickering in the desert sun, perfect for a broke college student driving cross-country. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few dusty pickup trucks and one sedan that looked like it hadn't moved in months. The motel itself was a classic Southwestern relic from the 1960s. Single-story, painted turquoise and pink, with rusty metal doors and windows that probably hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. Jake had seen worse during his road trip. Much worse. The front desk clerk was a thin woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. She looked up from a crossword puzzle when Jake entered the cramped office. "Need a room," he said. "How many nights?" "Just one. Maybe two if my car needs work." She quoted him a rate that was suspiciously low, even for a place like this. Jake didn't question it. His credit card was nearly maxed out, and he had maybe $60 cash left. "Room 13, she said, sliding an actual metal key across the counter. End of the row. Jake signed the register and headed outside. Room 13 was exactly where she said it would be. Last door on the right, separated from room 12 by about 10 feet of cracked concrete. The door was painted the same faded turquoise as the rest of the building, with a metal number nailed slightly crooked. The key worked fine. The room was standard cheap motel fare. 2 double beds with thin comforters, a small table and chair, television that probably received 3 channels on a good day, bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. Nothing obviously wrong with the place. Nothing supernatural or scary about peeling wallpaper and worn carpet. Jake threw his duffel bag on the far bed and went to check on his car. The Honda had died completely in the parking lot. When he turned the key, nothing happened. Not even a click. Great. He walked to the main road to look for a pay phone or mechanic shop. The desert stretched endlessly in both directions, broken only by scattered Joshua trees and the occasional billboard advertising casinos 50 miles away. No businesses, no gas stations, no signs of civilization except the motel itself. His cell phone showed no signal. Jake returned to room 13 feeling increasingly isolated. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky deep orange and purple. Beautiful, but somehow ominous out here in the middle of nowhere. He decided to get some sleep and figure out his car situation in the morning. That is when the first strange thing happened. Jake was lying in bed, drifting off to sleep, when he heard scratching inside the walls. Soft but persistent, like fingernails dragging across wood or metal. He sat up, listening carefully. The sound seemed to move along the wall behind his headboard, then disappear toward the bathroom. Mice, probably. Old buildings always had mice. But the scratching resumed around midnight. Louder this time, more deliberate. It traced a path around the entire room, following the walls from corner to corner. Jake got up and pressed his ear against the wallpaper. The scratching stopped immediately, as if whatever was making the sound knew he was listening. He waited 5 minutes. Nothing. As soon as he returned to bed, the scratching started again. This pattern continued until dawn. Scratching whenever Jake tried to sleep. Silence whenever he investigated. By morning, he was exhausted and irritated. The front desk clerk wasn't at her post when Jake went to complain. The office door was locked, with a handwritten sign that said, "Back in 30 minutes," taped to the glass. Jake waited an hour. She never returned. He walked around the motel, looking for other staff or guests. The parking lot still held the same vehicles from yesterday. The pickup trucks and sedans sat exactly where they'd been, covered in dust. Every room appeared empty. No sounds, no lights, no signs of occupancy. Jake returned to the office and tried the door again. Still locked. He peered through the window and noticed something odd. The guest register he signed yesterday was gone. The desk was completely bare except for that crossword puzzle. His name wasn't in the register because there was no register. Confused and increasingly worried, Jake decided to check out and find another place to stay. Maybe walk to the interstate and hitchhike to the next town. But when he tried to leave room 13, his key wouldn't work in reverse. The door was locked from the inside, and turning the key did nothing. The deadbolt was stuck in place. Jake examined the door carefully. The metal frame was solid. The hinges were on the outside, so he couldn't remove the pins. The lock mechanism seemed functional, but the key that had worked perfectly yesterday now turned uselessly in the cylinder. He tried the window, painted shut and probably hadn't been opened in decades. Jake was trapped. He spent the afternoon trying to break out, throwing his shoulder against the door, attempting to smash the window with a chair. Nothing worked. The door was apparently reinforced, and the glass was thicker than it looked. As evening approached, panic set in. Jake had water from the bathroom tap and a few snacks from his car, but no real food. His cell phone remained dead. No one knew where he was. The scratching in the walls resumed at sunset. This time, Jake was ready. He had his ear pressed against the wallpaper when the sounds began. What he heard made his blood freeze. Not fingernails on wood, not mice or insects. Words, whispered so quietly he could barely make them out, but definitely human speech coming from inside the wall. Help me, Ken, to get out. Room doesn't exist. Jake jerked away from the wall like it was on fire. The whispering stopped immediately. He stood in the center of the room, heart hammering, trying to process what he heard. Either he was losing his mind from stress and isolation, or there were people trapped inside the walls of room 13. Neither option was comforting. Jake found a pen and paper in the nightstand drawer and started writing. He needed to document what was happening in case someone found him later. In case this was more than just psychological breakdown from being trapped. Day 2 in room 13, he wrote. Heard voices in the walls. Door still open. No sign of motel staff. Starting to think this place isn't what it seems. The whispering resumed around midnight, but Jake forced himself to keep listening. The voices were clearer now, more distinct. Been here so long. Tried to leave. Door doesn't work. They under the bed. That last phrase stopped Jake cold. He looked toward the beds, suddenly afraid to check underneath them. But he had to know. Jake knelt beside the nearest bed and slowly lifted the thin comforter. Nothing but dusty carpet and shadow. He checked the second bed. Same thing. The whispering continued, but now Jake could make out individual voices. At least 3 different people. Maybe more. All of them sounded desperate. Frightened. Who are you? Jake whispered back. The voices stopped instantly. Jake waited, but the silence stretched on. Whatever was in the walls had heard him and decided not to respond. He wrote frantically in his journal, documenting every detail he could remember. The exact words he heard, the way the voices sounded, his growing certainty that other people had been trapped in room 13 before him. Dawn brought no relief. If anything, the supernatural atmosphere felt heavier during daylight hours. The room seemed smaller, the walls closer together, the air thicker and harder to breathe. Jake tried the door again. Still locked. The window remained painted shut, but something new had appeared overnight. Scratches in the wallpaper behind his bed. Deep gouges that formed crude letters. Help you as the scratches looked fresh. The wallpaper around them was torn and frayed as if fingernails had clawed desperately at the surface. Jake stared at the message, his mind racing. The voices in the walls weren't just sounds. They were communicating, trying to reach him. Where are you? He whispered to the wall. This time, the response came immediately. Between, multiple voices whispered back. Between the rooms, between the walls, between existing and not. How do I get out? You don't. There has to be a way. Room 13 doesn't exist. Check the front desk. Check the register. We're not here. Jake knew they were right, but he had to try. He returned to the front office and peered through the window again. The crossword puzzle was still there, but now he could see it more clearly. Every answer was the same word, written over and over in different handwritings. 13, 13, 13. The word appeared dozens of times across the puzzle grid. Different pens, different handwriting styles, as if multiple people had worked on it over time. Jake tried the office door again. Still locked. He walked around the entire motel, examining every room number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 14. There was no room 13. The space where his room should be was occupied by room 14. Same turquoise door, same metal number nailed to the surface. But Jake had a key to room 13. He was staying in room 13. He could see it from where he stood. Except according to the room numbers, it didn't exist. Jake returned to his impossible room and wrote in his journal, Day 3. Room 13 doesn't exist, but I am in it. Other voices in the walls. Previous guests, I think. All trapped like me. This is some kind of supernatural horror story. American creepypasta come to life. The scratching in the walls resumed during daylight hours. Not just whispers now, but actual physical sounds, like people clawing at the interior walls, trying to break through. Jake pressed his hands against the wallpaper and felt vibration. Movement. The walls were thin enough that he could sense activity on the other side. "How many of you are there?" he asked. "Lost count," came the reply. "Been here so long. Time doesn't work right. What happened to you?" "Same as you. Checked in. Couldn't to check out. Door stopped working. Then what?" "The bed." Jake felt ice in his veins. "What about the bed?" "Look under it again." "Really look." Jake didn't want to, but he forced himself to kneel beside the first bed. He lifted the comforter and peered into the shadows underneath. Nothing, but as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he began to make out shapes that shouldn't be there. Not on the floor, but somehow beneath it, as if the carpet was transparent and he was looking down into a deeper space. Faces, pale, desperate faces staring up at him through what should have been solid floor. Jake jerked backward, dropping the comforter. His heart was beating so hard he thought it might explode. The voices in the walls grew more urgent. "You see them now. They were waiting. Room fills up eventually. No more space in the walls. Then you go under." Jake understood with horrible clarity. The motel was some kind of supernatural trap. Room 13 existed in a space between normal reality and something else. Guests checked in but never left. First they heard voices in the walls. Previous victims who'd been absorbed into the structure itself. When the walls got too crowded, people were moved beneath the floor. Layer upon layer of trapped souls, stacked like cordwood in dimensions that folded in on themselves. American horror at its most efficient. "How long do I have?" Jake whispered. "Depends. Some people last weeks, others." The voice trailed off. Jake wrote frantically in his journal, documenting everything he learned. If someone found his notes later, maybe they could understand what happened. Maybe they could avoid the same fate. "They were under the bed," he wrote. "All the previous guests, trapped in layers beneath the floor. The walls are full of voices. People who, they've been here so long they've become part of the building itself." As he wrote, Jake noticed his handwriting was becoming less steady. His thoughts felt fuzzy around the edges. The supernatural influence of the room was affecting his mind. He forced himself to concentrate, to keep writing coherent notes while he still could. The motel traps people. Room 13 doesn't officially exist, so no one looks for missing guests. Perfect system, perfect horror. The scratching in the walls grew louder as night fell. More urgent, more desperate. "Don't give up," the voices whispered. "Fight it. Stay yourself as long as possible. Is there any way out?" "Never found one, but you. Different." "How am I different?" "You. Rewriting it down. Documenting. Maybe that matters." Jake didn't understand, but he kept writing. Every detail, every observation, every whispered conversation with the trapped souls in the walls. Around midnight, something changed. The scratching stopped abruptly, and the room fell completely silent. Then Jake heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, deliberate steps approaching his door. A key rattled in the lock, the same lock that had trapped Jake for 3 days. The door opened. The front desk clerk stood in the doorway, but she looked different now. Older, more translucent. Her tired eyes glowed with faint phosphorescence. "Time to check out," she said. "The door wouldn't open before. It opens when we want it to. When you were ready to join the others." Jake backed toward the window, clutching his journal. "I am not ready." The clerk smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp. "No one ever is, but the room needs space. You've been here long enough. 3 days, 3 months. Time moves differently here. Haven, you noticed how hungry you should be. How thirsty. The room provides what you need to survive, but it changes you in the process." Jake looked down at his hands. The skin was paler than it should be. His fingernails were longer, sharper. When had that happened? "What are you?" he asked. What's left of the first person who got trapped here." "Back in 1987. Traveling salesman named Margaret Chen. The room needed a manager, so it made me into one. You were the ghost of a guest. Whatever the room needs me to be. Just like you, I'll become whatever it needs you to become." Jake felt the truth of it in his bones. The supernatural influence was stronger now, harder to resist. His thoughts were becoming less human, more aligned with the hungry consciousness that inhabited room 13. "Why fight it?" Margaret asked. "You will be part of something larger. Something that serves a purpose. What purpose? Feeding the spaces between worlds. There are thin places where reality breaks down. Motels are perfect. Transient spaces where people expect to disappear for a while. We maintain the balance. Jake wanted to resist, but the logic made horrible sense. The room wasn't just trapping people randomly. It was serving some cosmic function, maintaining barriers between dimensions. American horror with a supernatural purpose. You could be the new manager, Margaret continued. I'm tired. Been doing this job for decades. Ready to move on to the next phase. What's the next phase? Margaret gestured toward the walls. Join the voices. Become part of the structure itself. Help maintain the reality of this place. Jake looked around the room one last time. At his journal, filled with desperate notes. At the scratches in the wallpaper where trapped souls had tried to communicate. At the beds that concealed layers of victims beneath impossible floors. Do I have a choice? Everyone has a choice. But the alternatives aren't too pleasant. Jake understood. He could become the new manager, trapping future guests but retaining some semblance of individual consciousness. Or he could resist and eventually be absorbed into the walls like all the others. Either way, he wasn't leaving room 13. If I take the job, Jake said slowly, can I change things? Make it less horrible for future guests? Margaret, his phosphorescent eyes brightened. You can try. Some managers are kinder than others. But the room has needs. People have to disappear. The cosmic balance requires it. Jake made his decision. He set down his journal and walked toward Margaret. As he approached, he felt his humanity slipping away bit by bit. His thoughts became clearer but less emotional. His purposes aligned with the supernatural consciousness that inhabited the motel. Margaret smiled with relief and began to fade. Thank you. The keys are in the office. The register regenerates itself every morning. Try to choose guests who want to be missed too much. She vanished, leaving Jake alone in room 13. But it wasn't the room 13 anymore. Jake was no longer a guest. He was management. The room shifted around him, walls rearranging themselves into the familiar cramped office space. The crossword puzzle materialized on the desk, blank and ready for a new day. Jake sat behind the counter and waited. Around dawn, a car pulled into the parking lot. A young woman with California plates and a nervous expression. Her Honda looked like it was on its last legs. Perfect. Jake put on his most welcoming smile as she entered the office. Need a room? He asked. Just for one night. How much? He quoted her suspiciously low rate and watched her face light up with relief. Room 13, Jake said, sliding a metal key across the counter. End of the row. She signed the register with neat handwriting. Lisa Chen. Chen? Like Margaret? Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert air conditioning. Patterns within patterns. Connections across time. Maybe Lisa was related to Margaret. Maybe she was drawn here by forces beyond coincidence. Maybe the room had ways of attracting specific victims. Or maybe it was just random horror, the kind that happened in America every day. Lisa took the key and headed for room 13. Jake watched through the office window as she opened the door and disappeared inside. The cycle had begun again. That night, Jake heard familiar sounds from room 13. Scratching in the walls, whispered voices of previous guests. The soft sounds of someone clawing desperately at locked doors and painted windows. He tried to feel guilty about it, but the emotion wouldn't come. The supernatural influence had changed him too completely. He understood his role now, the cosmic necessity of what he was doing. But he kept Lisa's journal when he found it the next morning, abandoned in room 13 after she'd been absorbed into the walls. Her final entry read, they were under the bed. They've always been under the bed. Room 13 doesn't exist, but I am here. I am here and I can leave. Jake added her journal to a collection he kept in the office safe. Dozens of notebooks and diaries, all ending with similar desperate observations. A record of everyone who passed through room 13 over the decades. Evidence that would never be seen by anyone who mattered. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months. Jake lost track of time as guest after guest checked into room 13 and never checked out. Some fought harder than others. Some accepted their fate with resignation. All of them ended up feeding the hungry spaces between worlds. Jake learned to choose his victims carefully. Travelers who were already isolated. People running from something. Individuals whose disappearance wouldn't trigger immediate investigations. The system worked perfectly. Until the night a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. Jake recognized the Honda immediately. Even though it was impossible. Lisa Chen's car. The same California plates. the same dents and scratches. But Lisa had been absorbed into room 13 months ago. Her voice was among those that whispered in the walls. The woman who entered the office looked exactly like Lisa, but younger. Maybe 18 instead of 25. "Need a room," she said. Jake stared at her, trying to understand what he was seeing. A relative? A coincidence? Something else? "How many nights?" he managed to ask. "Just one. Maybe two if my car needs work." The exact same words Lisa had used. Jake felt reality shifting around him like quicksand. The supernatural logic of room 13 was more complex than he realized. Time didn't. It just moved differently here. It looped back on itself. "Room 13, he said automatically, sliding the key across the counter. The young woman signed the register. Margaret Chen. Not Lisa. Margaret. Jake watched her walk toward room 13, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. This wasn't a coincidence or a relative. This was the original Margaret Chen, caught in a temporal loop that had been running for decades. She'd been trapped here in 1987, became the manager, eventually passed the job to Jake, then somehow circled back to the beginning of her story. A perfect closed loop of supernatural horror. Jake returned to his duties, but questions gnawed at him. If Margaret was caught in a temporal cycle, what about all the other guests? Were they reliving their capture over and over again? Was Lisa Chen destined to return in a few months, young and unaware of her previous fate? Was Jake himself part of a loop he didn't understand? The thought terrified him more than anything else that had happened in room 13. The idea that his choices weren't really choices. That his decision to become manager had been predetermined by forces beyond his comprehension. American horror at its most existential. That night, Jake heard Margaret scratching in the walls of room 13. The same desperate sounds every guest made during their first few days of captivity. But he also heard something else. The whispers of previous victims were different now. More organized, more purposeful. "Break the cycle," they murmured in unison. "End the loop. Free us all." "How?" Jake whispered back. "The journal. Use the journal." Jake didn't understand until he opened his desk drawer and found something that shouldn't exist. His own journal from when he'd been a guest. The notebook where he documented his imprisonment in room 13. But according to his memories, that journal had been left in room 13 when he became manager. It should have been absorbed along with his previous identity. Instead, it was here in his desk, with a new entry written in his own handwriting. Day 1 as manager. Trapped a girl named Lisa Chen. Felt nothing. The room has changed me completely. But I remember being human. I remember wanting to escape. Maybe that is enough. Jake stared at the entry. He had no memory of writing it, but the handwriting was definitely his. More entries appeared as he flipped through pages. Day 30 as manager. Starting to understand the pattern. The same guests return in cycles. Margaret Chen was the first. But she is also the most recent. Time is a circle here. Day 60 as manager. Found my old journal on the desk. Realized I've been writing in it without remembering. The room wants me to document everything, but I don't know why. Day 90 as manager. The voices in the walls are getting stronger. They were trying to tell me something important. Something about breaking free. Jake read through dozens of entries he didn't remember writing. His unconscious self had been documenting everything, creating a record of the supernatural cycle that trapped them all. The final entry was dated yesterday. The only way to break the loop is to refuse to participate. When Margaret Chen comes to the desk tonight, Dawn, to give her room 13. Give her any other room. Break the pattern. Jake looked up from the journal as footsteps approached the office. Margaret Chen stood outside, young and hopeful, ready to check in for what might be the 1,000th time. He had a choice to make. Continue the cycle and maintain the cosmic balance, keeping the hungry spaces between worlds fed with fresh victims. Or break the pattern and see what happened when the supernatural system collapsed. Jake made his decision. Need a room? He asked as Margaret entered. Just for one night, maybe two if my car needs work. Room 12, Jake said, sliding a different key across the counter. Second from the end, Margaret signed the register and took the key. As she walked toward room 12, Jake felt the entire motel shudder. Reality hiccuped. The air grew thick and electric. Something fundamental had changed. That night, Jake heard no scratching in the walls, no whispered voices. Room 13 was silent for the first time since he'd become manager. But other sounds filled the darkness. Creaking wood, shifting foundations. The motel itself was coming apart. Jake found his journal open to a new entry. You did it. You broke the cycle. Now we can all move on. But the spaces between worlds still need feeding. Something else will take the motel, this place. Something worse, probably. Thanks for nothing. The handwriting wasn't his own. As dawn broke over the Nevada desert, Jake walked outside to find the parking lot empty. Margaret, his Honda was gone. All the vehicles that had sat motionless for months had vanished. The motel looked different too. Cleaner, newer, as if decades of supernatural influence had been lifted away. Jake returned to the office and found the guest register blank. No record of anyone ever staying here. No evidence of the horror that had consumed so many lives. He was free, but as he walked toward the main road, preparing to hitchhike to civilization, Jake heard something that made his blood freeze. Scratching sounds from inside the asphalt beneath his feet. Whispered voices rising from storm drains and utility pipes. To escape. Just moved underground. Still here. Still hungry. Jake realized the horrible truth. He destroyed the supernatural trap. He just changed its location. The hungry spaces between worlds still needed feeding, and they found a new way to get it. Instead of a motel room that didn't exist, there was now a network of underground tunnels that shouldn't be there. Instead of guests checking in and never leaving, there would be travelers who pulled over to rest and disappeared into manholes that opened by themselves. The system had evolved, adapted, improved, and Jake was no longer the manager. He was just another potential victim. As he walked toward the interstate, Jake heard car engines in the distance. Other travelers approaching the spot where the Desert Palms Motel used to stand. Soon they need to stop. Use the restroom facilities that had appeared overnight. Check the utility tunnels that seemed to call to them. The cycle was beginning again. Jake tried to run, but his feet wouldn't obey. The supernatural influence was stronger now, more refined. It had learned from decades of trapping people in a single room. Now it could trap them anywhere. Jake felt himself sinking into asphalt that had become soft and yielding. Not quickly, but inevitably. Like quicksand made of American horror and bad decisions. His last conscious thought was a recognition of cosmic justice. He helped feed the hungry spaces for months. Now it was his turn to become food. The asphalt closed over his head with a sound like whispering voices. And somewhere beneath the Nevada desert, in tunnels that didn't appear on any map, Jake joined the growing collection of travelers who stopped at the wrong place at the wrong time. The scratching in the walls continued. It always did. Traffic moved steadily along Interstate 95. Drivers unaware of the network of supernatural tunnels spreading beneath their tires. Unaware of the voices whispering from storm drains and utility access points. Unaware that the next rest stop might be their last. The hungry spaces between worlds had found a better way to feed. And America had so many roads, so many travelers, so many people who wouldn't be missed until it was far too late. The horror was evolving, getting smarter, getting hungry. Story 3. Military experiment in Desert Bunker Number 7. The thing strapped to the metal table was still breathing. Sarah pressed her back against the concrete wall, fighting the urge to vomit. The creature, its chest rose and fell in shallow, mechanical rhythms. Its skin was gray-green, stretched too tight over bones that weren't quite human. "We need to leave," Marcus whispered from behind her. "Right now." But Sarah couldn't move, couldn't look away from the dozen tables lined up in the underground laboratory. Each one held something that might have been human once, before the experiments, before whatever the military had done to them in this forgotten bunker beneath the New Mexico desert. The nearest creature, its eyes snapped open. Milky white, but aware, focused directly on Sarah. Its mouth moved, forming words in a voice like grinding metal. "They coming back tonight." This nightmare had started 6 hours ago when Sarah's urban exploration team discovered Bunker Number 7 during their weekend trip to document abandoned military sites. What they found was supposed to be impossible. A secret facility that didn't exist on any map, hidden beneath sand dunes and decades of cover-up. Now Sarah understood why it had been buried. The bunker was part of a supernatural horror story that the American government never wanted told. Her team had been documenting abandoned places for 3 years. Marcus handled the photography. Tyler managed their YouTube channel where they posted creepypasta-style videos about forgotten American locations. Sarah did the research, tracking down military records and government documents through Freedom of Information Act requests. They built a decent following exploring everything from closed shopping malls to decommissioned missile silos. Their viewers loved the combination of urban exploration and historical mystery. Real American horror hiding in plain sight. Bunker number 7 should have been just another video. Just another government secret gathering dust in the desert. Instead, it was going to be their tomb. The facility was located 40 miles southeast of Roswell, which should have been their first warning. The area was thick with UFO legends and government conspiracy theories. Local Navajo avoided the region entirely, claiming it was cursed ground where skinwalkers gathered to feed. Sarah had dismissed the folklore as tourist nonsense. She focused on documented facts, not supernatural legends. But the facts about Bunker number 7 were stranger than any ghost story. According to classified documents Sarah had uncovered, the facility was built in 1962 as part of a project called Operation Nightfall. The official purpose was enhanced human performance research. The real purpose was creating super soldiers through genetic modification and psychological conditioning. The project was shut down in 1968 after what the documents called containment failures. The bunker was sealed and officially forgotten, except it wasn't empty. Sarah's team had used ground-penetrating radar to map the facility before breaking in. The scans showed a multi-level complex extending deep underground. Labs, living quarters, holding cells, and something else the radar couldn't identify. Massive spaces filled with what looked like organic growth. They entered through a maintenance shaft hidden behind a rocky outcrop. The entrance was sealed with a steel door marked with radiation warnings and biohazard symbols. Marcus had brought bolt cutters and a portable ankle grinder. Nothing they couldn't handle. The door opened easily, too easily, as if someone had left it unlocked. The first level contained standard military facilities. Offices, communications equipment, storage rooms filled with supplies that should have rotted decades ago but looked perfectly preserved. The air tasted metallic and wrong, like breathing inside a battery. Tyler was documenting everything with his camera, narrating in the dramatic style their viewers expected. This is it, folks. We're inside one of America's most classified military installations. What secrets has the government been hiding in the desert for 50 years? If only he'd known. The elevator to the lower levels was still functional. The buttons were labeled with codes instead of floor numbers, B1 through B5, then something called deep storage at the bottom. They started with B-1. The laboratories were pristine, too pristine. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed under fluorescent lights that shouldn't have had power. Computer monitors displayed scrolling data in languages Sarah didn't recognize. Equipment hummed with electronic life. This place is still active, Marcus said, lowering his camera. We need to get out of here. But Tyler was already moving deeper into the facility, drawn by the prospect of exclusive footage. Are you kidding? This is the discovery of a lifetime. Think about the views this will get us. Sarah wanted to leave too, but professional curiosity overrode her instincts. The research data on those monitors could rewrite history, prove that the American government had been conducting illegal human experiments decades before anyone suspected. They descended to B2. The holding cells were worse than the labs. Dozens of reinforced rooms with thick glass windows. Most were empty, but the walls were covered in scratch marks. Deep gouges where fingernails had worn away concrete over years of desperate clawing. Some cells still contained personal effects. Clothing, jewelry, family photos, all from people who disappeared without explanation over the past 50 years. Jesus, Tyler breathed, filming through one of the windows. How many people did they bring here? Sarah was examining a clipboard hanging beside one of the cells. Test subject logs, written in clinical language that made her stomach turn. Details about psychological conditioning, genetic therapy, surgical modifications designed to optimize human potential. The subjects weren't volunteers. They were homeless people, runaway teenagers, anyone who wouldn't be missed. Taken from cities across the Southwest and brought to this underground horror show. American citizens used as lab rats by their own government. B3 contained the surgical suites. Operating tables surrounded by machines Sarah couldn't identify. Devices with too many cables and screens displaying biological data that made no sense. Heart rates, brain activity, genetic markers for things that shouldn't exist. The smell here was worse. Antiseptic mixed with something organic and rotten. Like flowers left too long in stagnant water. Marcus found the first body on B4. It was strapped to a gurney in what looked like a recovery room. The person had been dead for years, mummified by the dry desert air filtering through hidden vents. but the restraints were still tight around wrists and ankles. Whatever they'd been trying to prevent, death hadn't been enough to stop it. That is not natural mummification, Sarah said, examining the corpse more closely. Look at the bone structure. The proportions are wrong. The skeleton had been altered. Ribs extended too far. Limbs were longer than human anatomy allowed. The skull was stretched vertically, as if something had been growing inside it. Tyler was getting great footage, but his usual enthusiasm was fading. Guys, I'm starting to think we're in over our heads here. Sarah agreed, but they'd come too far to turn back now. The real secrets were probably on the bottom level, the deep storage area their radar had identified. B5 was where they found the living subjects. The laboratory was massive, carved directly from bedrock beneath the desert. Dozens of metal tables arranged in precise rows, each one occupied by something that had once been human. The creatures were breathing. Heart monitors showed steady rhythms. IV tubes delivered nutrients to keep them alive despite modifications that should have been fatal. Sarah approached the nearest table with horrified fascination. The subject appeared to be male, maybe 30 years old when the experiments began. His arms had been replaced with articulated metal appendages. Surgical scars covered his torso where organs had been removed or relocated. His head was shaved and marked with injection sites. But his eyes were aware, tracking her movement with desperate intelligence. "Can you understand me?" Sarah whispered. The creature, its mouth opened. When it spoke, the voice was purely human despite the mechanical breathing apparatus attached to its throat. "Please, kill me." Sarah jerked backward, colliding with Marcus. His camera captured her reaction, but he wasn't looking at the footage. He was staring at something else. Fresh supplies on a nearby counter. Medical equipment that looked recently used. Computer terminals displaying current vital signs for every subject in the lab. "This ISN, abandoned," Marcus said quietly. Someone was still running the experiments. As if summoned by his words, elevator motors whirred to life somewhere above them. Someone was descending to their level. "They were coming back tonight," the creature whispered again. "They always come back." Sarah's team ran for the maintenance shaft they used to enter the bunker. But the elevator reached B5 before they could escape the laboratory. 3 figures in white coats emerged. They looked human at first glance, but something was wrong with their proportions. Too tall, too thin, movements that were precise but somehow mechanical. Like the subjects on the tables, but mobile, functional. "Unauthorized personnel detected," one of them said in a voice devoid of emotion. "Initiating containment protocol." The laboratory doors sealed automatically. Steel barriers dropped from the ceiling, cutting off every exit. Sarah and her team were trapped with the experiments and their creators. Or what their creators had become. "Please, Don, they hurt us," Tyler said, still filming despite his terror. We're just urban explorers. We want to tell anyone what we saw here." The lead figure tilted its head at an unnatural angle. "Psychological evaluation indicates deception. Subject demonstrates knowledge of classified operations. Recommendation: immediate processing for integration." "Integration?" Sarah asked. "The enhancement protocol requires continuous test subjects. Your arrival is fortuitous." Sarah understood with cold clarity. The experiments hadn't stopped in 1968. They continued for decades, hidden from oversight by bureaucratic amnesia and government compartmentalization. The original researchers had become test subjects themselves, transformed into something that could operate without sleep, food, or human limitations. Perfect scientists for projects that never ended. "Run," she told Marcus and Tyler. But there was nowhere to go. The laboratory was sealed. The creatures on the tables were stirring, reacting to the presence of fresh subjects. Heart monitors accelerated. Restraints creaked under renewed struggling. The white-coated figures approached with syringes filled with luminescent fluid. "The enhancement process begins with neural modification," the lead researcher explained in that emotionless voice. "Pain receptors are adjusted to prevent psychological trauma during physical restructuring." Sarah grabbed a scalpel from a surgical tray. "Stay back." The researcher paused, analyzing her threat posture with inhuman calculation. "Aggression indicates inadequate preparation. Recommend preliminary conditioning before enhancement initiation." One of the other figures pressed a button on a control panel. Gas began hissing from vents in the ceiling. Sweet-smelling vapor that made Sarah's vision blur and her limbs feel heavy. "Sleep now," the researcher said. "Enhancement begins upon awakening." Sarah fought the sedative as long as possible, but enhanced humans were patient. They simply waited for the gas to take effect, making notes on clipboards while her team collapsed one by one. Tyler was the first to go down, his camera hitting the floor with a crack that echoed through the laboratory. Marcus tried to reach Sarah, but his legs gave out halfway across the room. Sarah held out longest, probably due to adrenaline, but even fear couldn't to overcome military-grade chemical engineering. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness was one of the researchers approaching with restraints. When Sarah woke up, she was strapped to a metal table. The restraints were tight around her wrists and ankles. IV tubes had been inserted in her arms. Monitors displayed her vital signs on screens she couldn't see clearly without her glasses. Subject exhibits normal response to awakening, a voice said somewhere beyond her field of vision. Initiating Phase 1 modifications. Sarah tried to speak, but something was covering her mouth. A breathing apparatus similar to the ones used by the other test subjects. She could breathe, but vocalization was impossible. Terror gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Sarah thrashed against the restraints with desperate violence, but they were designed to hold enhanced humans. Regular strength was useless. Elevated stress responses detected, the voice noted clinically. Administering psychological conditioning agents. A new substance entered her IV line. This one burned like liquid fire through her veins, but the pain faded quickly. In its place came artificial calm. Chemical serenity that muffled her emotions without eliminating awareness. Sarah could still think clearly, but the overwhelming fear was manageable now. She could observe what was happening to her with almost scientific detachment. The researchers moved around her table with efficient coordination. They weren't human anymore, but they retained medical knowledge and surgical precision. Perfect tools for continuing experiments that regular humans couldn't stomach. Beginning skeletal reinforcement, one of them announced. Sarah felt drill bits entering her bones. Not painful exactly, thanks to the nerve blockers, but deeply wrong. Metal pins and reinforcement plates were being inserted throughout her skeleton. Preparation for whatever came next. Hours passed. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness as her body was systematically modified. Each time she woke, something else had been changed, enhanced, optimized for purposes she didn't understand. During one lucid moment, she turned her head and saw Marcus on a nearby table. He was still recognizably human, but barely. His arms had been replaced with mechanical versions. Cables ran from ports in his skull to monitoring equipment. His eyes met hers. Still aware, still Marcus, despite everything they'd done to him. Tyler was on another table, unconscious or sedated. His modifications were more extensive. Sarah couldn't tell where the machines ended and his body began. Phase 2 initiating, a researcher announced. Neural integration with cybernetic systems. Sarah felt something being inserted into the base of her skull. Not painful, but alien. Foreign, like having thoughts that weren't her own mixing with her consciousness. New sensations flooded her awareness. Electronic signals from the laboratory equipment. Data streams from the monitoring systems. Digital information overlaying her normal senses. She was becoming like them. Enhanced. Optimized. No longer entirely human, but unlike the researchers, Sarah retained her emotions, her personality, her memories of who she'd been before the modifications. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe they needed test subjects who could remember being human to compare the before and after. Or maybe they were just getting better at preserving what mattered while changing everything else. Integration successful, the lead researcher observed. Subject maintains personality matrix while accepting cybernetic enhancement. Optimal result for Phase 2 testing. Sarah tried to speak through the breathing apparatus. To her surprise, she could. The device was designed to allow communication once the vocal modifications were complete. "What did you do to me?" she asked. "Enhanced your capabilities beyond baseline human limitations. You are now prototype designation 7 Alpha 3. Congratulations. I don't want to be enhanced. Want is a psychological construct with limited relevance. You will adapt to your new capabilities as all subjects do." Sarah tested her restraints again. This time, she could feel structural weaknesses in the metal. Her enhanced senses provided detailed analysis of stress points and failure thresholds. She was stronger now, much stronger, but she was also connected to the laboratory's computer systems through the cybernetic implants. Every thought was being monitored and recorded. Every emotional response was being analyzed for future reference. Even her resistance was part of the experiment. "Release me," Sarah said. "Premature. Phase 3 modifications require additional preparation time." "What is Phase 3? "Psychological conditioning to ensure loyalty and compliance." Your enhanced capabilities require appropriate behavioral modifications to prevent security breaches. They were going to erase her personality, turn her into another emotionless researcher dedicated to continuing the experiments forever. Sarah had maybe hours before they completed her transformation. She focused on the cybernetic connection, trying to understand how it worked. The implants provided access to the laboratory's computer network, but the connection was bidirectional. She could receive information, but she could also send commands. If she was careful, Sarah began exploring the digital systems while pretending to be unconscious. The network was extensive, connecting every piece of equipment in the facility. Environmental controls, security systems, communication arrays, even the elevators. Most importantly, the restraint mechanisms. Sarah waited until the researchers were focused on Tyler's modifications, then sent a carefully crafted command to release her restraints. The system accepted her authorization because she was registered as an enhanced subject with appropriate clearance levels. The straps around her wrists and ankles clicked open. Sarah sat up slowly, testing her new capabilities. Her vision was sharper, her hearing more sensitive. Muscle response was faster and more precise. The enhancements were remarkable, even if she never asked for them. She could escape now, fight her way out of the bunker and expose what was happening here. But Marcus and Tyler were still trapped, still being modified by creatures that had once been human researchers. Sarah couldn't leave them behind. She slipped off the table and approached the nearest researcher from behind. Her enhanced reflexes made the attack effortless. One precise strike to disable its cybernetic connections, then another to damage critical components. The researcher collapsed, but its companions reacted immediately. Security breach detected, they announced in unison, initiating lockdown protocols. The laboratory doors sealed again, but this time Sarah was ready. Her cybernetic implants gave her access to the security systems. She could override the lockdown and open any door in the facility. The remaining researchers moved to intercept her with inhuman coordination. They were faster and stronger than baseline humans, but Sarah's enhancements were newer, more advanced. She fought them with capabilities she was still discovering. Enhanced strength, accelerated reflexes, cybernetic analysis of their movement patterns. The battle was brief and decisive. When it was over, Sarah stood alone among the wreckage of the creatures that had once been scientists. But the facility's AI systems were still active, still monitoring, still recording everything for analysis by whoever was ultimately responsible for the experiments. Sarah needed to free Marcus and Tyler, then destroy all evidence of what had happened here. The American government could never be allowed to continue these supernatural horrors. She released Marcus first. His modifications were extensive, but he was still conscious. Still himself. Sarah, he asked through his breathing apparatus. What happened to you? Same thing that happened to you. But I figured out how to fight back. Tyler was unconscious but stable. His enhancements were the most extreme of the three, but Sarah's cybernetic connection showed his vital signs were strong. Can we reverse this? Marcus asked, examining his mechanical arms. I don't know. But first we need to get out of here and make sure no one else gets taken. Sarah used her network access to unlock the elevator and restore power to the upper levels. The facility AI tried to stop her, but her clearance codes overrode every security protocol. They reached the surface as dawn was breaking over the New Mexico desert. Sarah's enhanced vision could see for miles in every direction. No signs of other people or vehicles. But her cybernetic implants were detecting radio signals, communication bursts being sent from the bunker to receivers she couldn't locate. Someone knew they escaped. We need to move, Sarah told Marcus. They recalling for backup. Tyler was still unconscious, but Marcus could carry him with his enhanced strength. They headed for their van, parked behind the rocky outcrop that concealed the bunker entrance. The vehicle started normally, but Sarah's cybernetic senses detected tracking devices hidden throughout their equipment. Every camera, every piece of recording gear, even their cell phones were broadcasting location data. They've been watching us from the beginning, she realized. The whole urban exploration thing was a setup. They needed test subjects, so they monitored YouTube channels and social media to find people who explored abandoned places. Marcus stared at her through the rear view mirror. You mean we were specifically targeted? Think about it. We always found detailed information about classified sites, government documents that should have been impossible to access, perfect maps and building plans. Someone was feeding us information to lead us exactly where they wanted us to go. The horrible truth was becoming clear. Their entire YouTube channel had been a recruitment tool for human experiments. Their followers weren't just viewers. They were potential subjects being evaluated for future collection. American horror disguised as entertainment. How many other urban explorers have disappeared? Sarah asked. How many YouTube channels have gone dark after their creators found the perfect abandoned location? Marcus didn't answer, but his enhanced processing capabilities were already analyzing the data, cross-referencing missing persons reports with urban exploration content. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. Dozens of channels had stopped posting after visiting remote military sites. Hundreds of explorers had vanished while documenting government facilities. All of them had probably ended up in places like Bunker Number 7. Sarah drove toward Roswell, trying to figure out their next move. They needed medical attention for Tyler, but hospitals would ask questions they couldn't answer. They needed to contact authorities, but which ones could be trusted? The experiments had been running for decades. They required funding, oversight, protection from investigation. That level of institutional support could only come from the highest levels of government. Sarah, as cybernetic implants buzzed with an incoming transmission. Against her better judgment, she accepted the connection. Prototype 7 Alpha 3, a familiar emotionless voice said inside her head. Return to the facility immediately. Go to hell, Sarah replied. Your escape was anticipated and permitted as part of the behavioral analysis. You are still within acceptable parameters for the experiment. Sarah felt ice in her enhanced veins. What do you mean? The modifications include remote monitoring and control systems. Your location, vital signs, and thought patterns are being continuously recorded. When sufficient data has been collected, you will be recalled for Phase 3 completion. Sarah tried to sever the connection, but the cybernetic implants wouldn't respond to her commands. Someone else was controlling them now. Additionally, your companions require regular maintenance to prevent system failures. Without appropriate medical support, their enhancements will begin rejecting biological tissue within 72 hours. Marcus was listening through his own implants. His mechanical arms were already showing signs of inflammation where they connected to organic tissue. What do you want? Sarah asked. Continue your activities as before. Document abandoned facilities. Upload content to your channel. Lead other potential subjects to collection points. In exchange, you will receive the medical support necessary to maintain your enhancements. Sarah understood the trap now. They couldn't expose the experiments without revealing their own modifications. They couldn't seek help without putting themselves back in government custody. They couldn't even stop exploring abandoned places without condemning Marcus and Tyler to slow death from rejection syndrome. They were perfect recruiting tools now. Enhanced humans who could access places normal people couldn't reach. Who could survive dangers that would kill ordinary explorers, and whose viewers would never suspect they were being evaluated for human experimentation. You have 48 hours to resume content creation, the voice continued. Failure to comply will result in remote activation of termination protocols built into your cybernetic systems. The connection ended, leaving Sarah alone with the horrifying knowledge that escape was impossible. They were still test subjects, still part of the experiment, but now they were also predators, whether they wanted to be or not. Sarah drove in silence while Marcus monitored Tyler's vital signs. Their friend was stable, but the modifications were extensive. Without proper medical support, he would die within days. So what do we do? Marcus asked eventually. Sarah considered their options. All of them were terrible. We make videos, she said finally. We explore abandoned places. We lead people to bunkers like Number 7. And hope someone else figures out how to stop this? Or we figure out how to use our enhancements to shut down the program from the inside. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. Sarah pointed their van toward the next location on their list. An abandoned missile silo in Colorado that had been decommissioned in the 1970s. According to the documents they'd been provided, it was completely empty. Safe for urban exploration, but Sarah's enhanced senses were already detecting the lies. Radio signatures that suggested active electronics. Heat patterns indicating recent human activity. Another trap, another bunker. Another collection point for human experiments disguised as abandoned military history. And they were going to lead their viewers straight into it, because the alternative was death for Tyler and eventual termination for all of them. American horror at its most efficient. A system that turned victims into accomplices, ensuring the experiments would continue indefinitely. Sarah started recording as they drove, narrating their next adventure for the camera. Hey everyone, it's Sarah from Urban Legends Explored. We Heading to another incredible location today. An abandoned missile silo that has been sealed for decades. Who knows what secrets we'll find buried in the Colorado desert. Her enhanced hearing picked up the sound of her viewers' heartbeats through their computer speakers as they watched the live stream. Excited, trusting, ready to follow their favorite explorers into the darkness, Sarah smiled for the camera and drove toward the next collection point. The experiments were evolving, getting smarter, getting more efficient, and America had so many abandoned places, so many curious explorers, so many people who would never be missed until it was far too late. The horror was spreading, adapting, learning from every mistake. Soon there would be enhanced humans in every major city, creating content that led viewers to government facilities disguised as abandoned locations. The perfect recruitment system for supernatural American horror that would never end. Sarah kept driving, her cybernetic implants buzzing with new instructions and target locations. The experiments needed fresh subjects, and she was going to help provide them. Story 4. Smiling man at Walmart. Sarah, his cart squeaked down aisle 12. The sound echoed through the empty Walmart like a dying animal. 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Nobody shopped this late except insomniacs and weirdos. She needed diapers. Her baby had blown through the last pack during a midnight blowout that painted the nursery walls. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Half of them flickered. The other half buzzed like trapped flies. This store felt wrong at night. Different, like something hungry was watching from every shadow. She grabbed a pack of size 2s. Behind her, someone laughed. Not a normal laugh. Too high, too long. It stretched on until it didn't sound human anymore. Sarah turned around. The aisle was empty. Just rows of baby formula and pacifiers staring back at her with dead plastic eyes. Must have been the speakers. Walmart played weird music at night. Stuff that made your skin crawl. But the laughing had come from right behind her. She pushed her cart faster. The squeak grew louder, more urgent, like it was trying to warn her about something. The baby section felt endless. Cribs and car seats stretched into shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. At the end of the aisle, she saw him. A man stood perfectly still in the toy section. Tall, thin, wearing a red polo shirt that looked too small. His back was to her, but something about his posture made her stomach turn. Too rigid, like a mannequin. Sarah tried to ignore him, focused on her shopping list. Formula, wipes, baby food, normal things, safe things, but her eyes kept drifting back to the man in red. He hadn't moved, not an inch, just stood there staring at the Barbie dolls like they held the secrets of the universe. She pushed her cart toward the main aisle, had to pass him to get to checkout. As she got closer, she noticed something else. The man was smiling. She could see it in profile. A wide grin that stretched too far across his face. Way too far. The smile went from ear to ear. Literally, like someone had carved it there with a knife. His teeth were perfect, white as bleached bone, and there were too many of them. Rows and rows of teeth that went back into darkness. Sarah, his hands shook. She gripped the cart handle tighter. This was just her imagination. Post-pregnancy hormones, sleep deprivation. She'd been having weird thoughts since the baby came. Seeing things that weren't there. But the man's smile was definitely there. As she passed behind him, his head turned. Slowly, like an owl, his neck rotated further than any human neck should go, until he was looking right at her with eyes that were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just endless black holes that seemed to pull light into them. And that smile, that horrible, impossible smile. Beautiful night for shopping, he said. His voice sounded wrong, like it was coming from underwater, or from very far away. Sarah nodded quickly, kept walking. Dawn, to engage with the crazy people. This is what her mom always said. Just smile and walk away. But she could feel him watching her. Feel those black eyes boring into her back like drill bits. She turned the corner into the grocery section. Relief flooded through her, away from him. Away from that supernatural grin and those dead eyes. Just her and the late-night snacks and energy drinks. The dairy case hummed. Normal sounds, comforting sounds. She grabbed milk and cheese. Tried to forget about the smiling man. Probably just someone on drugs. This was Ohio. Meth was everywhere. Made people do weird things. But when she reached for yogurt, she saw him again, reflected in the glass door, standing right behind her, still smiling that impossible smile. Sarah spun around. The aisle was empty. She looked back at the glass. He was gone from the reflection too. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. She was tired, stressed. New mothers saw things sometimes. It was documented. Sleep deprivation could cause hallucinations. She pulled out her phone, started recording. If she was losing her mind, at least she did have proof. The camera showed normal Walmart aisles, fluorescent lights, empty shelves, nothing scary, nothing supernatural. But in the phone, a speaker, she heard something else. Static, white noise that shouldn't be there. And underneath it, very faint, the sound of laughing. That same high-pitched laugh from the baby aisle. Sarah stopped recording, checked the video. Just her walking through empty aisles. No sound except her footsteps in the squeaky cart. The laughter was gone. She was definitely losing it. Time to go home. Back to her apartment. Back to her sleeping baby and her normal life. Away from this American horror movie she somehow wandered into. Sarah headed for self-checkout. The machines beeped and chirped in the empty store. Robotic voices thanked her for shopping. Told her to have a nice day. As if anything about this night was nice. She scanned her items quickly. Diapers, formula, milk, the barcode scanner. This red light painted everything the color of blood. The machine kept asking for help. Unexpected item in bagging area. She wanted to scream at it. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. Sarah turned around. The smiling man stood 3 feet away. Up close, she could see details that made her stomach lurch. His skin was gray, waxy, like it belonged on a corpse. His red polo shirt had dark stains that looked suspiciously like blood. And that smile, it was even worse up close. The skin at the corners of his mouth had torn from stretching too far. Fresh blood trickled down his chin. "You, next," he said. The words came out in a sing-song voice, like a nursery rhyme. "You, next, you, next, you, next." Sarah grabbed her bags and ran. Her cart crashed into a display of chips. Bags exploded everywhere. She didn't stop, didn't look back. Just ran toward the exit like her life depended on it. The automatic doors seemed to take forever to open. She squeezed through before they were fully apart. The parking lot stretched out in front of her, empty except for her Honda Civic under a flickering streetlight. She fumbled for her keys, dropped them, picked them up with shaking hands. Behind her, the Walmart doors slid open. The smiling man walked out. Slowly, casually, like he was just another late-night shopper heading home. But his impossible grin glowed in the streetlight, and his black eyes reflected nothing at all. "You, next," he called across the parking lot. His voice carried further than it should have. "You, next, Sarah." How did he know her name? She got the car door open, threw her bags in the back seat. The engine turned over on the third try. Sarah backed out fast, tires squealing on the asphalt. In her rearview mirror, she saw him standing under the Walmart sign. Still smiling, still watching, he raised one hand and waved goodbye. But his arm bent the wrong way, like it had extra joints. Sarah drove home way too fast, ran 3 red lights. Didn't care. She just needed to get away from that place. Away from him. Away from whatever the hell that thing was. At home, she locked every door, every window, checked the baby's room twice. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, tiny chest rising and falling. Normal, safe, real. Sarah tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw that smile. Those black holes where eyes should be. Heard that voice saying her name. At 4 a.m., her phone buzzed. Text message from unknown number. "Thanks for shopping with us tonight. We hope you visit again soon." Below the message was a photo. Security camera footage from inside Walmart. It showed Sarah at self-checkout. But she wasn't alone. The smiling man stood right behind her. His hands were on her shoulders. His face was inches from her neck. And his mouth was open so wide she could see down his throat into darkness that went on forever. But Sarah remembered being alone at checkout. She looked around. No one was there. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. "You, next." Then another. "You, next." And another. "You, next." The messages kept coming. Hundreds of them. All the same 2 words. Her phone vibrated constantly. The screen lit up the dark bedroom like a strobe light. Sarah turned off the phone, threw it in a drawer. But she could still hear it buzzing. Muffled but persistent, like an angry wasp trapped in wood. She needed help. Police, FBI, somebody who dealt with creepypasta stuff and urban legends. But who would believe her? A tired new mom claiming some supernatural thing was stalking her from Walmart. They'd think she was crazy. Maybe she was crazy. At dawn, the buzzing stopped. Sarah retrieved her phone. The screen was cracked. The battery was dead. But when she plugged it in and turned it on, there were no messages. No calls, no photos, just her normal contacts and apps. Like nothing had happened. But in her camera roll, she found something new. A video she didn't remember taking. It showed the Walmart parking lot, empty except for her car under the streetlight. And standing next to her car, barely visible in the darkness, was a tall figure in red, smiling. The video was timestamped 3:17 a.m. after she'd gotten home, after she delocked all the doors. Sarah called in sick to work, didn't leave the apartment, ordered groceries online, avoided Walmart like it carried plague, but late at night, she found herself looking out the window, scanning the parking lot below. He was never there, but she felt watched anyway. 3 weeks later, her neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on the door. Sweet old lady who babysat sometimes. But today she looked worried. "Sarah, honey, are you okay? I saw a man outside your apartment last night. He was just standing there, smiling. Gave me the creeps." Sarah, as blood turned to ice water. What did he look like? Tall, thin, red shirt, but his smile was all wrong. Too big, like someone had cut his face. That night, Sarah packed a bag, called her sister in California, made up a story about wanting a change of scenery. She and the baby were on a plane by morning. But on the flight, the passenger behind her was reading a newspaper. The headline made her stomach drop. Local woman found dead in Walmart parking lot. The article was about someone named Jennifer Martinez, 26 years old, mother of two, found in her car outside the same Walmart where Sarah had shopped. Cause of death unknown. No signs of violence, but witnesses reported seeing her talking to a man in a red shirt just before she died. A man with an unnaturally wide smile. Police had security footage. It showed Jennifer walking to her car alone. No man in red anywhere. But in the audio, they could hear her voice. She seemed to be having a conversation with someone. Her last words, caught on tape. "Please, I have children. I am not ready." And underneath her voice, barely audible, the sound of laughter. Sarah's hands shook as she read. This wasn't random. Wasn't a coincidence. That thing at Walmart was hunting, collecting, and she was on its list. The plane landed in Los Angeles. Sarah took a taxi to her sister's house. Safe. 3,000 miles away from Ohio. From Walmart. From whatever was wearing that red shirt and impossible smile. But that night, as she tucked her baby into the borrowed crib, she heard her phone buzz. Text message from unknown number. Distance doesn't matter. You, still next. Below the message was another photo. This one showed Sarah's sister's house, taken from the front yard. The timestamp was 15 minutes ago. In the background, barely visible in the shadows, stood a familiar figure. Still smiling, Sarah dropped the phone. It clattered across the hardwood floor. The screen cracked but kept glowing. More messages poured in. Hundreds, thousands, all the same two words. You, next. You, next. You, next. The phone buzzed so hard it skittered across the floor like a living thing. The sound filled the house. Woke the baby. Made the windows rattle. Sarah ran to her sister's room. Shook her awake. "We have to leave. Now. Pack everything. Done." To ask questions. But her sister was already dead. Eyes wide open. Staring at the ceiling. And across her face, carved deep into the skin, was a smile. Ear to ear. Just like his. On the nightstand, her sister's phone showed a final text. She was next. You, last. Sarah grabbed her baby and ran. Out of the house. Into the California night. But she could hear footsteps behind her. Slow, patient, following her exact path. And floating on the night air, carried by desert wind that reminded her of home, came the sound of laughter. High-pitched, endless, getting closer. The last thing on Sarah's phone, recovered by police 3 days later, was a video file. It showed nothing but static. White noise that hurt to listen to. But buried in the static, barely audible, were voices. Sarah screaming, a baby crying, and underneath it all, that terrible laughter. The kind that doesn't sound human. The kind that never stops. Even now, if you visit that Walmart in Ohio, employees will tell you stories. About the man in the red shirt who appears in the toy aisle. About customers who see him shopping late at night. About the ones who disappear. Their cars found empty in the parking lot. Engines running. Phones recording nothing but static and the sound of something laughing in the dark. The security cameras never show him. But if you listen to the audio, I'll hear him talking to people who aren't there. Always the same words. You, next. And somewhere in the static, if you listen close enough, you can hear them answer back. Right before they scream. Story 5. Black-eyed children of Yellowstone. The knocking stopped. Mike pressed his ear against the RV door, listening to the Wyoming wind howl through the pines. 3 sharp raps, then silence. Nothing but the distant hiss of Old Faithful and his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. His wife Sarah slept in the back bedroom. Their twin boys, Danny and Jake, curled up in sleeping bags on the fold-out couch. All of them exhausted from their first day exploring Yellowstone, all of them trusting him to keep them safe. But something was wrong with this campground. Had been wrong since they arrived. Mike checked his phone. 2:17 a.m. No cell service. They were 30 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by wilderness that stretched for hundreds of square miles. Just them and whatever was knocking on their door in the middle of the night. He peered through the tiny window. The campground looked empty. Other RVs sat dark and silent under the starlight. No campfires, no late-night conversations, just shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. The knocking started again. Soft, polite, almost childlike. Knock, knock, knock. Mike grabbed the baseball bat from the closet. His hands shook as he approached the door. Through the frosted glass, he could see shapes. Small shapes, maybe 3 feet tall. Kids? Who brought kids camping in October? The nights dropped below freezing. Snow dusted the peaks around them. This wasn't family camping weather. Hello, Mike called through the door. His voice cracked. No answer, but the shapes moved closer, pressed against the glass. He could see outlines now. 2 children, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing perfectly still. Are you lost? Mike asked. Where are your parents? Still no response. The children didn't speak. Just stood there like statues in the freezing night. Mike's gut told him not to open the door. Every horror movie he'd ever seen started with someone opening the door. But these were children, kids who might be lost, scared, hypothermic. He couldn't just leave them out there. His hand hovered over the deadbolt. Through the glass, he could see them more clearly now. Pale skin, dark hair, wearing summer clothes that were completely wrong for the weather. T-shirts and shorts in sub-freezing temperatures. But they weren't shivering. Mike unlocked the door, opened it a crack. The chain latch stopped it after 2 inches. Hey, he whispered. You kids okay? The boy stepped forward, looked up at Mike through the crack. And Mike, his blood turned to ice water. The kid, his eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just endless darkness that seemed to swallow light. Empty holes in a face that was too pale, too perfect, too still. Please let us in, the boy said. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script. We're cold. We need help. Behind him, the girl nodded. She had the same black eyes, the same unnatural stillness. When she opened her mouth to speak, Mike saw that her teeth were perfectly white. Too perfect, like they'd been carved from bone. We won. It hurt you, she said. We just want to come inside. Where it's warm. Every instinct Mike had screamed at him to slam the door. Lock it, wake up his family and drive away as fast as possible. These weren't the normal children. Weren't the human children. But they looked so young, so helpless. Where are your parents? Mike asked again. They were sleeping, the boy said. Everyone was sleeping, except us. The girl tilted her head. The movement was too quick, too sharp, like a bird. Please, she said. We're so cold, so hungry. Mike looked past them into the campground. The other RVs were still dark, still silent, but something bothered him about the silence. It was too complete, too heavy. Where were the normal camping sounds? No snoring from nearby RVs. No generators humming. No dogs barking. Nothing but wind in the distant geysers. I need to wake up my wife, Mike said. She handles this kind of thing better than me. He started to close the door. The boy, his hand shot out, pressed against the wood. His palm was ice cold, white as snow, and his fingernails were too long, too sharp. Time to wake them, the boy said. His voice was still flat, but there was something underneath it now. Something hungry. They need their sleep. They had a long day. How did he know they had a long day? We can wait, the girl added. We're very patient. We've been waiting a long time. Mike tried to push the door closed. The boy, his hand didn't to budge. It was like pushing against stone. Impossible strength in such a small frame. Please, the boy said again. We just want to come in, to be warm, to be with your family. The way he said family made Mike's skin crawl, like he was tasting the word, savoring it. No, Mike said. He threw his full weight against the door. The boy, his hand finally moved. The door slammed shut. Mike turned the deadbolt and stepped back, breathing hard. Through the window, He could see them still standing there, watching, waiting. Sarah appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. What is going on? I heard voices. Kids, Mike said. Lost kids. Something is wrong with them. Sarah looked through the window. The space outside was empty. No children, no shapes in the darkness. I don't see anyone, she said. Mike pressed his face to the glass. The boy and girl were gone. But in the dirt where they'd been standing, he could see footprints. Small, bare, leading away into the trees. They were right there, Mike insisted. 2 kids, maybe 8 years old. Black eyes. Completely black. Sarah felt his forehead. You, burning up. Are you feeling okay? Mike wasn't too sick, but he was exhausted. They'd driven 12 hours to get here. Set up camp in the dark. Maybe he was seeing things. Stress and fatigue could play tricks on the mind. I'm fine, he said. Just tired. But he wasn't fine. And as Sarah went back to bed, Mike stayed by the window, watching, waiting. At 3 a.m., he saw them again. This time they were at the RV across from them. A big Class A motorhome with Texas plates. The children stood by the door. The same boy and girl. Still wearing summer clothes. Still perfectly still. Mike grabbed his binoculars. Through the lenses, he could see them clearly. Pale skin that seemed to glow in the starlight. Hair so dark it looked like it absorbed light. And those eyes, empty black holes that made him dizzy to look at. The boy knocked on the Texas RV's door. 3 soft raps. Polite, patient. A light came on inside. Mike could see movement through the windows. Someone getting up, walking to the door. Don, to open it, Mike thought. Whatever you do, Don, to open that door. But the door opened anyway. An older man appeared. Gray hair, flannel pajamas. He looked confused, concerned, just like Mike had been. The children spoke to him. Mike couldn't hear the words, but he could see the man's reaction. Confusion turning to concern. Concern turning to something else. Something that made him step back. But it was too late. The children walked into the RV. The door closed behind them. The lights went out. Mike waited, watched, but nothing else happened. The RV sat dark and silent like all the others. No screams, no sounds of struggle, just silence. But in the morning, when the sun came up and other campers started moving around, something was wrong with the Texas RV. The door hung open, moving in the wind, and scattered around it, like autumn leaves, were shoes. Men, slippers. Women, flip-flops. Children, sneakers. But no people. Mike walked over to investigate. Called out hello. No answer. Inside the RV, everything looked normal. Beds were made. Coffee pot was ready to brew. Suitcases sat packed and organized. But the RV was empty. Completely empty. Like its occupants had simply vanished. The only sign they ever existed were the shoes outside, arranged in neat pairs, like someone had carefully placed them there. Mike called the park rangers, reported missing persons, but when they arrived, they didn't. He seemed surprised. They took notes, asked questions, but their responses felt rehearsed, like they'd done this before. Happened sometimes, Ranger Williams said. He was a thick man with gray hair and tired eyes. People leave their gear and walk off, get lost in the wilderness, usually turn up in a day or two. But Mike had seen them, seen the children go inside, seen the lights go out. What about the shoes? Mike asked. People do strange things when they read confused, disoriented. Altitude sickness can mess with your head. The ranger's explanation made sense. But Mike knew what he'd seen, and he knew those weren't the normal children. That night, he didn't sleep, kept watch through the window. Sarah and the boys thought he was having some kind of breakdown. Stress from work, midlife crisis. They talked about cutting the trip short, going home to Colorado. But Mike couldn't leave. Not until he understood what was happening here. At 2:17 a.m., they came back. The same boy and girl, still in summer clothes, still perfectly pale and still. They walked through the campground like they owned it, moved between the RVs with purpose. They stopped at a fifth-wheel trailer with Montana plates, knocked on the door. 3 soft raps. Mike grabbed his camera, started recording. He needed proof, evidence that would make people believe him. Through the lens, he watched the family inside wake up. A middle-aged couple and their teenage daughter. They came to the door, looked out at the children, and made the same mistake everyone made. They opened the door. Mike zoomed in on the children's faces. Through the camera, he could see details that made his hands shake. Their skin wasn't just pale. It was translucent. He could see veins underneath. Black veins that pulsed with something that wasn't blood. And their eyes, God, their eyes, they weren't to just black. They moved, swirled like oil, like tiny hurricanes of darkness. The children spoke to the Montana family. Mike couldn't to hear the words, but he could read lips. The same request, the same polite plea. Please let us in. We're cold. We need help. The family hesitated. The father looked suspicious. The mother seemed concerned. But the teenage daughter was the one who made the decision. She stepped aside, welcomed them in. The children walked into the trailer. The door closed. The lights went out. Mike kept recording, waited for something to happen. Screams, sounds of struggle, but there was only silence. And in the morning, more shoes scattered outside another empty RV. This time, Mike was ready when the Rangers arrived. He showed them the video on his camera, proof of what he'd seen. But when he played it back, the screen showed nothing but static. White noise and interference, like something had erased the footage. Equipment malfunction, Ranger Williams said. Happens a lot up here. Electromagnetic interference from the geothermal activity. But Mike knew better. Something was protecting these children, hiding them, making sure no evidence survived. That day, he researched everything he could find about black-eyed children. Used the campground's spotty Wi-Fi to dive deep into internet forums and creepypasta sites. Found stories from all over America. Urban legends about supernatural kids who appeared at doors, who begged to be let in, who made people disappear. The stories went back decades, centuries, maybe, but they all had the same elements. Pale children with black eyes, polite requests for help, and missing people who left nothing behind but their shoes. Some forums called them demons. Others said they were aliens. A few claimed they were the ghosts of children who died in the wilderness. Lost hikers who frozen to death and come back wrong. But everyone agreed on one thing. Never let them in, no matter how young they looked, no matter how helpless they seemed. Because once you opened the door, you were gone. Mike shared his findings with Sarah, showed her the forum posts and witness accounts. But she was worried about his mental state. Talked about seeing a doctor when they got home. These are just stories, she said. Internet nonsense. Creepypasta stuff that people make up to scare each other. But that night, the children came for them. Mike saw them approaching across the campground. The same boy and girl. But this time they weren't alone. Behind them walked other children. Dozens of them. All pale. All still. All with those horrible black eyes. They moved in formation, like soldiers, surrounded Mike's RV from all sides. Cut off every escape route. The original boy stepped forward. Knocked on the door. 3 soft, polite raps. Please let us in, he called. We know you, reawake. We know you, rewatching. Mike woke Sarah and the boys. Told them to stay quiet. Stay hidden. But Danny, their youngest, was curious. He wanted to see the children. Are they here to play? He whispered. No, Mike said. They were not here to play. The knocking continued. Patient, persistent, and slowly, other voices joined in. Dozens of children outside, all making the same request. Please let us in. We're cold. We need help. But their voices were getting louder, more insistent. The politeness was fading, revealing something hungrier underneath. Sarah finally looked through the window, saw the children surrounding their RV. Her face went white. Oh my God, she whispered. What are they? I don't know, Mike said. But we can let them in. The children seemed to hear him. Their knocking became pounding, fists against aluminum siding. The RV shook with each impact. Let us in, they shouted now. The pretense of politeness was gone. Let us in! Let us in! Jake started crying. The sound seemed to excite the children. Their pounding grew more frantic, more violent. One of them appeared at the window. A girl maybe 10 years old. She pressed her face against the glass. Her breath fogged it despite the freezing temperature. I can see you in there, she said. Her voice was different now. Older, ancient. I can smell your fear, your warmth, your life. More faces appeared at other windows. Children climbing on top of the RV, surrounding them completely. Their black eyes reflected the interior lights like mirrors. We've been so patient, the original boy called out. So polite, but patience has limits. The pounding stopped. Sudden silence fell over the campground. The children stepped back from the RV, formed a circle around it. It'll give you one more chance, the boy said. Open the door, invite us in, or I'll find another way. Mike knew they were trapped. No cell service, no help coming, surrounded by things that weren't human. Things that had been hunting in these woods for who knows how long. But he also knew the rules. Every story he read was clear. The children couldn't come in uninvited. Couldn't to break down doors or break windows. They needed permission, needed to be welcome. As long as nobody opened the door, they were safe. We're not letting you in, Mike called out. Ever. The children laughed, high-pitched giggles that came from too many throats. The sound echoed off the mountains, bounced back from the forest. We don't need you to let us in, the boy said. We just need one of you to want us in, to feel sorry for us, to care. Mike looked at his family. Sarah held the boys close, protected them. But Danny was staring out the window, his 8-year-old face full of concern. They look sad, Danny whispered. Maybe they really do need help. No, Mike said quickly. Don, to think like that. Don, to feel sorry for them. But it was too late. He could see it in Danny's eyes, the compassion that made him special, the kindness that made him want to help lost puppies and injured birds. The same kindness that was going to get them all killed. They were just kids, Danny said. Like me and Jake. Maybe they were scared. The boy outside smiled, his black eyes fixed on Danny through the window. He understands, the boy said. Children always understand. They remember what it's like to be alone, to be afraid. Danny moved toward the door. Sarah grabbed his arm. No, honey, stay away from there. But Danny pulled free. He was stronger than he looked. Determined. I just want to help them, he said. His small hand reached for the door handle. Mike lunged forward, tackled his son away from the door. They hit the floor hard. Danny started crying. I hate you, Danny screamed. They need help and you want to let me help them. Outside, the children laughed again. They fed on emotion, on kindness turned against itself. Soon, the boy said. Very soon. The siege continued through the night. The children never left, never got tired, just waited, watched, whispered things designed to break down their resolve. They told Sarah about other mothers who let them in. How peaceful it had been. How quick. They told Jake stories about children who played with him forever, in the dark places under the earth. They told Danny that his parents were mean, selfish, that he could have friends who really understood him. And slowly, steadily, they wore them down. By dawn, the family was exhausted, nerves frayed. Danny kept looking at the door with longing. Jake had stopped crying and started listening to the children's whispers. Even Sarah was wavering. Maybe we should just call the Rangers, she said. Let them handle this. But Mike knew the Rangers wouldn't help. They were part of this somehow. Had to be. The way they dismissed the missing families. The way they explained away the evidence. Yellowstone was their hunting ground, and the Rangers were either victims or accomplices. As the sun came up, the children faded into the forest. But they didn't go far. Mike could see them in the trees, waiting, watching. During the day, other campers arrived. New families looking for the perfect wilderness experience. They set up in the spots where people had vanished, used the water hookups and fire pits of the disappeared. Nobody seemed to notice the shoes scattered around the campground. Or if they did, they didn't care. That afternoon, a park ranger stopped by. Not Williams, a younger man with kind eyes and a helpful smile. How is your stay going? He asked. Everything okay? Mike almost told him everything. Almost begged for help, but something in the ranger's eyes stopped him. A flicker of black, just for a second. Fine, Mike said. Just fine? The ranger smiled. Good to hear. Yellowstone could be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Easy to get lost. Easy to disappear. After he left, Mike packed the RV, told his family they were leaving, cutting the trip short. But when he tried to start the engine, nothing happened. Dead battery. Impossible. It had been fine yesterday. He checked under the hood. Everything looked normal, but the battery cables had been cut. Clean cuts, like someone had used wire cutters. They were trapped. That night, the children returned in greater numbers. Hundreds of them now, maybe thousands. They filled the campground, surrounded every RV, every tent, every hiding place, but they only knocked on one door. Mike, this door, last chance, the original boy called out. Open up, let us in, or watch your family disappear one by one. Through the windows, Mike could see other families in other RVs. All of them dealing with the same siege. All of them surrounded by pale children with black eyes. But something was different about those families. They moved strangely, stiffly, like puppets, and their eyes reflected light like mirrors. They were not real, Mike whispered. The other campers, they were not real. Sarah looked out the window, saw what he saw. The puppet families going through the motions of camping, setting up fires, cooking food, talking to each other in voices that carried no emotion. What happened to the real people? She asked. Mike thought about the shoes, the neat piles left behind when people vanished. I think the children wear them, he said. Like costumes, like masks. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. The entire RV shook with each impact. "Let us in! Let us in! Let us in!" Danny covered his ears, rocked back and forth. The constant noise was breaking him down, making him desperate for it to stop. "Make them go away," he cried. "Please make them go away." "I can make them go away," the boy outside said. His voice was right next to the window now. "I can make the noise stop. I can make everything peaceful. You just have to let me in." Danny looked up, tears streaming down his face, hope flickering in his 8-year-old eyes. "Really?" he whispered. "Really? I promise. Cross my heart and hope to die." The boy, his laugh was like breaking glass. Danny stood up, walked toward the door. This time, nobody tried to stop him. They were all too tired, too broken. His small hand touched the door handle. "Don, to do it, son," Mike said weakly. "Please, Don, to do it." But Danny wasn't listening. He was 8 years old and scared and tired, and all he wanted was for the noise to stop. He opened the door. The boy stepped inside. His bare feet left wet prints on the RV floor, water that looked black in the dim light. "Thank you," the boy said. "You're very kind." Behind him, the girl followed. Then more children. They filled the RV like smoke, surrounded the family. Mike tried to fight, tried to protect his wife and sons. But the children were stronger than they looked. Their cold hands held him down. "Don, to worry," the boy said. "It won. To hurt. Much." The last thing Mike saw was Danny. His face. Still kind, still compassionate. But his eyes were changing. The brown iris fading. Darkness spreading like spilled ink. "I can see everything now," Danny whispered. "All the lost places. All the forgotten people." His voice was getting older, ancient. "Thank you for letting us in, Daddy. Now we can all be together forever." The next morning, park rangers found the RV empty, door hanging open in the wind, personal belongings scattered around like the occupants had left in a hurry. And outside, in the dirt, 4 pairs of shoes, adult sneakers, a woman's hiking boots, 2 small pairs of children's shoes, arranged in neat pairs, like someone had carefully placed them there. Ranger Williams wrote up the report. "Missing persons, probably wandered off into the wilderness. Happens all the time in Yellowstone. But if you visit that campground now, if you stay in the spot where the Colorado family disappeared, you might see them. Late at night, when the moon is dark and the wind carries whispers from the forest. Children walking between the RVs, pale and still impatient, knocking on doors, making polite requests, looking for new families to join their eternal camping trip. And if you look closely at their faces, you might recognize them. A man from Colorado, his wife, their twin boys, all of them with black eyes now, all of them hungry for the warmth of the living, all of them knocking on doors. 3 soft, polite raps, asking to be let in. Because that's what families do in Yellowstone. They camp together, forever,